The outer gate didn't look like much. 2 cracked concrete posts, an old keypad faded from sun, and a swinging arm that barely rose without groaning. Most vehicles passed through without slowing down. Contractors, trucks, training staff in black SUVs. And next to the shack, sitting alone, thermos in one hand, clipboard in the other, was Mr. Rudd. He wasn't military. Not anymore, at least. No patches. No rank. Just a navy windbreaker zipped to the throat and boots worn soft at the heel. His hat had no logo. His eyes, pale gray, didn't seem to blink much. He logged each vehicle with a single pencil mark. Never typed. Never looked rushed. Some said he used to be a comms tech. Others thought he was just a base rat with an old favor owed. But nobody really knew. At 0540, the first round of SEAL trainees jogged by in silence. The compound still dark except for a dull gold strip on the horizon. One of the younger ones, Mason, squared jaw, 3rd week in, looked over as they passed the gate. He nudged the guy next to him. "Why is that guy always here before us?" The other shrugged. "Probably lives in the booth." They laughed. The kind of laugh you give something small, dismissible. Mr. Rudd didn't react, just raised 2 fingers off his clipboard as they passed. A small gesture. Barely noticeable. Mason glanced back once. Felt like a signal. But for what, he didn't know. Later that morning, a delivery truck rolled up late. The guard at the secondary gate was off shift, so Rudd stepped forward. Didn't ask for the badge. Didn't wave the scanner. Just walked halfway to the front bumper and said evenly, "Back axle pressure's wrong. You're not cleared for this route." The driver blinked, confused. "What?" Rudd pointed, not at the manifest, but at the tires. "That tread pattern's off base. Turn around." The driver hesitated, but then did as he was told. Inside the ops trailer, a junior officer watched the security cam rewind the moment. He squinted. Didn't even scan the badge. Mason, watching nearby, said nothing. But for the second time that morning, he felt like the old man knew something no one else did. The van came through just before noon. Civilian plates. Contractor markings. Nothing unusual on paper. It crawled toward the gate under overcast skies, sunlight flickering through clouds like a slow metronome. Mr. Rudd stood already, clipboard resting against his side. He didn't move to block the van, didn't even raise his hand. He just looked at the wheels, then the windshield, then back to the dust. The van idled. Rudd stepped forward, slow, deliberate, and tapped once on the hood with his knuckle. Not loud, not aggressive, just enough. The driver lowered the window. "Problem?" Rudd leaned down slightly. "Where'd you come from?" The driver blinked. "Depot." "Which one?" Pause. "The main one." Rudd nodded once. "Turn around." "I'm cleared." "Tread's too clean." "Sand tells me you staged just outside." "Dust pattern says east pull." "You came in from Civilian Road, not base supply." The driver froze. No threat in Rudd's voice. No tension in his posture. Just certainty. Like gravity had spoken. He stepped back. "Turn around." The van didn't argue. It reversed, slow, almost embarrassed, and rolled away. Rudd never wrote it down. He just watched until it was gone. Inside the drone surveillance booth, Mason caught the edge of it on camera. He ran the footage back, tracking the dust trail, the tire drag. Rudd had been right. The pattern was clean, unnatural. The van hadn't passed through the depot. And no one else caught it. Later, Mason mentioned it at lunch. "Guy stopped a fake van by reading the tire dust." The others didn't look up. "Man probably watches too much CSI," one said. Another chuckled. "Or maybe he's just guessing and getting lucky." Mason shook his head. He wasn't guessing. The table went quiet for a moment. Then one of the instructors, older, calm, looked over his tray. "Some people learn to read the road like it's speaking." "You think he used to be someone?" Mason asked. "If he was," the instructor said, standing, "he doesn't want you to know." That night, Mason passed the gate on his way back from Calm's lab. Mr. Rudd was still there. Same bench. Same coat. Still. Watching the road. Not for vehicles. For what the dust didn't say. Mason waited for the right moment. It came 2 days later, early evening. The compound was quiet. Drills done. Chow hall cleared, sky dimming into that gray-blue haze that settles before nightfall. He jogged the perimeter route slower than usual, deliberately peeling off near the outer checkpoint. Mr. Rudd was there, as always, seated, silent, pencil in hand this time, sketching something on a folded map. Mason slowed his steps, stopped at the edge of the booth. Evening, he said. Rudd didn't answer. Didn't look up. Just circled a point on the map, then tucked it away. Mason tried again. That thing you said to the van guy, about the dust. Where'd you learn that? Rudd finally looked at him. Not directly. Just enough to let Mason feel the weight of the gaze. You hear a lot when no one's talking. It wasn't sarcastic. Just true. Mason hesitated. My instructor said some people learn to read the road. You one of them? Rudd raised an eyebrow, just slightly, then asked, You ever hear the phrase blue echo, broken leg still moving? Mason's mouth went dry. He had. Once. In a classified debrief log from an old recon op they weren't allowed to ask about. A call sign for a rescue that never got filed. The phrase was only used between boots deep inside denied zones, where satellite coverage failed and communications were done in hand signs and trust. He swallowed. That's not common knowledge. Rudd didn't blink. Neither are patterns in windshake dust, but they're still there. Mason didn't know what to say, so he just stood there. After a long moment, Rudd unfolded the map again. This time, Mason saw the sketch clearly. Not terrain, not roads, just patterns, radiating arcs, intercepts, like a memory of movement. Then Rudd asked, You ever run point without knowing who's watching your back? Mason nodded slowly. Couple times. Rudd folded the map. Next time you do, check the shadows before you check your 6. The next morning, Mason tried to pull Rudd's file. It was blank past 2001, and the access request logged a quiet flag. No rejection. No approval. Just a new field appeared under the file's title. Access deferred. No forward chain. He closed the terminal, suddenly aware that he'd asked too much. The command office smelled like stale coffee and old carpet, the kind of room where policy settles heavier than dust. Mason sat stiff in the chair across from Lieutenant Commander Hale. He kept his voice even, respectful. I think the outer gate guard, Mr. Rudd, has prior recon background, possibly pre-01. His behavior, terminology, and instincts line up with. Hale cut him off with a glance. You say prior background like that's your call to make. Mason kept still. I'm not assigning anything, sir. Just observing. Then observe this. Hale leaned back. We've had 29 trainees this quarter. 18 have flagged something about that man. His silence, his posture, his eyes. You're not the first to ask. Mason waited. And every time we ran a trace, it stopped cold. No DD-214. No retirement ceremony. No ribbons. Just a civilian contract renewal filed in a locked drawer. He opened one of the folders on his desk and flipped to a form. Blank under. Former rank. Blank under. Exit reason. Just a redacted serial number and a handwritten note. No forward chain. Clearance void. Do not pursue. Hale tapped it. This base was built on the backs of men like him. Men who went deep, quiet, far enough that we were told not to ask where. So why is he on our gate? Mason asked. Because he asked to be. Mason stood to leave, then hesitated. He's still sharp. Hale looked up. Not unkind, but something harder. If he is who we think he is, you better hope he stays forgotten. That evening, Mason passed the outer gate again. He didn't say anything, just nodded, and Mr. Rudd nodded back. 2 fingers, a tap, same as always. It happened during a routine handoff drill, the kind that looked clean on paper. 2 units trading Overwatch in a movement corridor just outside the compound perimeter. SEAL instructors observed from the tower, logging time, formation, spacing. Mason was one of the float men, assigned to shadow and report angles. Nothing dramatic. Until the final team crossed near the outer gate. Mr. Rudd stood just outside his booth, arms folded, watching without expression. He didn't speak, didn't interfere. But as the second team leader jogged past, an older instructor named Chief Halvorsen, 20 years in, the kind of man who'd been everywhere and said almost nothing about it, something stopped him, mid-stride. A pause. Then he turned, slowly. Rudd hadn't moved, but he'd raised his right hand. 2 fingers. A small, angled tap against his left forearm. Not a wave, not a greeting. A signal. Halvorsen froze. His mouth parted, but no words came. For a second, Mason thought something was wrong. Heat stroke, maybe. Confusion. Then Halvorsen stepped off the path, walked directly toward the booth. No one else followed. He stopped a foot in front of Mr. Rudd. Eyes locked. Then, without saying a word, He stood at attention and saluted. Not a quick nod. A full salute. Respectful. Earned. Mr. Rudd didn't return it, but his eyes softened, just a little, and he gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Halvorsen lowered his hand. Didn't think I'd see you again, he said quietly. Didn't think you'd remember, Rudd replied. Halvorsen looked toward the road, then back. Some of us never stopped waiting for the tap. I never stopped watching, Rudd said. Later, in the locker bay, Mason asked Chief Halvorsen what that was about. The chief just sat down, unlaced his boots. Didn't answer at first, then finally said, We had men who could disappear without leaving the room. The only thing louder than their silence was what they remembered. You knew him? Mason asked. No one knows men like that. You just know you don't forget them. That night someone placed a folded slip of paper under Mason's gear locker. No note, no signature. Just a phrase, handwritten. Blue echo. Broken leg. Still moving. He looked toward the outer gate through the hallway glass, and saw the booth lights still on. The base archive wasn't glamorous. A concrete annex built into the back slope. More storage room than library. No digital terminals, just boxes, manual files. Things too old or too forgotten to bother scanning. Mason went down there on his own. No one sent him. He wasn't sure what he was looking for until he found it. The box was unmarked on the side, dusty, corner-crushed, wedged behind two rusted filing cabinets. He pulled it out carefully, hands blackened from age-stained cardboard. Inside, paper logs, old mission briefs, and a folder labeled simply, Foxtrot 9, 1997. He flipped it open. No names, just call signs, photo paper clipped to the inside flap. 6 men stood in a loose semicircle, half in shadow. Not in uniform, not in formation, just there, quiet, still, deliberate. Their eyes blurred by age and light leak. But at the center, one figure sat on a supply crate, shoulders relaxed, head tilted like he was listening to something distant. His hand rested against his comms pouch. 2 fingers lightly tapped. Mason stared. He didn't need clarity. He didn't need a name. The posture said everything. It was Mr. Rudd. He turned the photo over. Someone had written in pen. Observer team. Last pull. Still moving. No date. No location. Just a stamp. No forward chain. Do not archive. Mason folded the photo, placed it into his field notebook, and walked out into the late afternoon sun. At the gate, Mr. Rudd was back in his seat. Same windbreaker. Same silent watch. Mason approached. Didn't speak, just held out the photo. Rudd didn't take it. Just glanced once, then returned his gaze to the horizon. You shouldn't carry that. I don't plan to, Mason said. I just wanted to know if it was real. Rudd didn't blink. It was. Then, after a pause, still is. He tapped the side of his thermos once. We didn't carry patches. We carried men. The wind picked up just after midnight. Mason couldn't sleep. Something about the stillness of the compound felt off, like the air was waiting for a sound that never came. So he walked. No gear. No boots. Just quiet steps toward the outer gate, where the light above the booth burned soft and steady. The kind of light you leave on not because you need it, but because someone might. Mr. Rudd was sitting outside this time, thermos balanced on the railing, jacket zipped, hands still. He didn't move when Mason approached. Didn't need to. Mason stood beside the bench. Waited. Finally Rudd spoke. It's quieter when the op is over, but the map still changes. Mason said nothing. Rudd reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded sheet, soft from time, corners bruised. He handed it over without ceremony. That's what the satellites don't see. Mason unfolded it slowly. It wasn't a topographical map. Not exactly. It was hand-drawn, gridless. Built on wind lines, silence zones, elevation dips. A kind of terrain you could only understand from inside the mission. Certain spots were marked with faint excess, others had nothing. Just empty space. At the bottom, one word was scrawled in pencil. Blind ground. He looked at Rudd. Why give this to me? Because someone once did the same for me, Rudd said quietly. And because you stopped talking long enough to notice. Mason sat down on the bench beside him. For a while, either of them spoke. Then Rudd added, You ever wonder why some men guard gates long after they're done walking through them? Mason shook his head slowly. No. Good, Rudd said. Keep it that way. The next morning, Mr. Rudd's booth was empty. Not unusual, but different. The light was off. The clipboard was gone. Only the bench remained, with a folded slip taped to the back rail. Mason found it during his perimeter loop. 3 words in neat handwriting. Still watching. R. The breach drill wasn't on the schedule. It came as a no-warning test, dropped straight from command. Simulate a full compound lockdown. Test all outer entry points. Audit reaction time and vulnerability. Most laughed when the sirens started. Until the alerts stacked faster than the responses. One of the contractor vans had circled twice before entry. No one saw it. The tread matched base issue. Badge scan clean. But something was wrong. Mason knew before the call came in. He pulled out the map Rudd had given him. The satellites don't see this map. He checked the path the van had taken. It passed through a marked blind ground. Unmonitored terrain. Silent signal. Not on the compound's official maps. But Rudd had drawn it by hand. That's where the mistake had come from. That's where the van had staged. Mason ran the protocol from the map, rerouted patrol, and triggered a non-lethal lockdown on the approach gate. When they intercepted the van, the tags were right, but the undercarriage had custom mounts. Too clean. Too fast. They were stopped without noise. No weapons. No shouts. But later that day, a recon officer passed Mason in the corridor and said only, "Who gave you that blind ground grid?" Mason didn't answer. Just nodded once. The report filed later simply stated, "Gate vulnerability closed by trainee override. Manual mapping confirmed breach path." Command noted it. Quietly. No award. No recognition. But the next day, the bench by the tower was polished. A small plaque had been placed under the armrest. No rank. No title. Just this. L. Rudd. Watch the quiet paths, so others could move loud. Mason now walked that route every morning. He didn't carry the map anymore. He knew it. The wind had changed. The ground had shifted. But one thing hadn't. At the outer gate, there was no man sitting anymore. But every time Mason passed by, he raised 2 fingers to the horizon, just enough for a silent nod. Because some men don't leave their post, even when they're no longer seen.